Marvin, what are you doing? Oh my God, it's running!
I'm a hunter, and I made the fatal mistake of rescuing a wounded Bigfoot from a bison attack. What happened next didn't just change my life, it also ripped apart everything I thought I knew about reality. The truth I'm about to tell you reveals a side of Bigfoot far darker and more terrifying than any encounter has ever described. I've been hunting these mountains for 30 years. I know the difference between a grizzly track and a black bear's, between the cough of a sick elk and the warning bark of a healthy one. I know when something is watching me from the timber, and I've learned not to turn around too fast. What I didn't know, what no amount of winters in a wall tent could have taught me, was that the woods have been lying to everyone. The stories about Bigfoot, the ones that painted as shy or noble or just lost, those stories are lies. The real thing is something else entirely, and I met it on a November afternoon when the snow was just starting to stick and the light was going yellow and wrong. The bull bison had Bigfoot pinned against a deadfall, both horns buried deep into its left thigh, and the sound coming out of the creature's mouth was the worst thing I had ever heard in 30 years of backcountry hunting. Thin, reedy, almost childlike, a whimpering that had no business living inside a chest that wide. I was 200 yards out when I saw them through the trees, and my brain spent a full second refusing what my eyes were sending it. 8 feet tall at least, shoulders like a barn door, covered in thick, dark auburn fur, matted black with blood where the horns had gone in. That wrong human sound coming from something that was not human at all. If this thing was real and dying right in front of me, could I really just leave it there? I didn't think so. I raised the rifle, found the bison's spine behind the shoulder, and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked across the basin and echoed off the far tree line and came back flat and hard. The bull lurched sideways. I cycled the bolt, fired again into the neck, again into the base of the skull, and 4 seconds after the first round, the bull went down heavy and rolled onto its side in the snow, blood spreading out beneath it in a dark stain that steamed in the cold air. Bigfoot hadn't moved. Still pinned, thigh skewered on one of the horns jutting from 1,000 pounds of dead animal, it turned its head and looked directly at me with amber eyes the color of old whiskey. It did not blink, not once, not in all the time I stood there staring back at it across the snow. I should have walked away. Instead, I walked forward through the crunching snow, pulled the bison's head until the horn came free, and knelt beside the wound. The thigh was laid open to the bone. I could see the pale shaft of the femur through 3 inches of torn muscle. Blood pumped out in a thick, almost black rhythm. I reached into my pack for the fishing line I always carry, and the curved suture needle I'd bought at a farm supply store on a whim 3 seasons back, and I stitched that wound closed in the dark while Bigfoot watched me do it. I worked with a headlamp. Neither of us moved except my hands. Bigfoot's breathing slowed from ragged gasps to something steadier, and around 2 in the morning, it finally closed those amber eyes. I sat back against a log and watched the stars wheel overhead and tried not to think about what would happen when it woke up. When morning came, would it remember the man who helped it, or only the fact that I was there? Dawn came gray and quiet. When I heard the shift of weight and the deep exhale, Bigfoot was already standing, fully upright, head clearing the lower pine branches by half a foot. I looked at the thigh. The wound, 43 stitches of 10-pound monofilament, 4 hours of work, had closed to a flat pink scar. The fishing line lay in the snow beside its foot, shed like a snakeskin. The flesh beneath had knit itself together overnight as cleanly as if it had never been opened. Bigfoot stood there breathing. I stood there breathing. Then it lifted its head and sniffed the air in slow, methodical pulls, turning its face north, then west, then directly toward me. Something changed in its expression, a loosening around the eyes, a settling of the jaw, and I recognized it the way you recognize it in a dog that has stopped deciding whether you're friend or enemy. Whatever gratitude had been there was gone. It had cataloged me, filed me. The amber eyes went cold in a different way. It smiled. The lips pulled back, and I saw the teeth, pieces of a shattered dinner plate, jagged and overlapping, far too many in a jaw, far too wide. Then it reached down and picked up my hunting knife from where it had fallen out of my pack during the night, turned the blade between 2 fingers the size of summer sausages, and snapped it. Not the handle, the blade. 4 inches of hardened steel, clean off. It set the handle down in the snow with something that felt almost like courtesy, almost like a statement of terms. I ran. I hit the tree line at full sprint and didn't look back for the first 100 yards. When I did, Bigfoot was not running. It was walking, a long, loose, ground-eating stride, arms swinging easy, unhurried, like something that has never in its life needed to hurry. It was already closing the distance. I understood immediately that it was not trying to catch me, not yet, because it was walking in wide arcs just inside my peripheral vision, cutting left when I cut left, drifting right when I angled right. Herding, the word landed in my brain like a stone dropped in still water. I had a satellite phone in my pack. I reached it without stopping, fumbled it out while my boots punched through the frozen crust, watched the screen blink to life. 1 bar. I was scanning for a clearing when I found one. A natural meadow 60 yards ahead, maybe 2 acres of open ground. I hit it at a dead run and had the phone up and was keying in the emergency sequence when Bigfoot stepped out of the trees on the far side of the meadow. Not from behind me, from ahead. It had circled without me seeing it, silent for its size, and it sat down cross-legged in the snow directly in front of me like it had been waiting. The amber eyes went to the satellite phone. Then Bigfoot reached out and took it from my hand. I was too stunned to resist and crushed it. One slow, deliberate squeeze. The screen shattered, the case buckled, and pieces of plastic and circuit board rained down on the snow between us. How had it known exactly what that phone was for? I turned and ran again. The deadfall was 50 yards into the timber, a pile of logging slash from some operation 20 or 30 years back, trunks stacked on trunks, a structure of organized chaos that had slumped and settled over the decades into something almost architectural. I scrambled up the near face, pulled myself over a horizontal trunk as thick as my torso, and dropped into a hollow between 2 stacked timbers with just enough room to wedge myself in. Bigfoot did not scramble. It walked to the base of the pile, found a support log near the bottom, old-growth fur, still mostly sound, and pushed it. Not struck, not kicked. Pushed with what looked like 30% of its available effort. The whole structure groaned. I felt it in my spine, in my back teeth. Timbers that had been leaning together for 2 decades suddenly had new opinions about gravity. The log I was lying on dropped 4 inches with a sound like a rifle shot, and the gap I was wedged in began to close. The ribs on my left side hit first. The pressure built steadily like a vise being turned by someone who has all day, and I was twisting and kicking when a massive hand reached in from below and wrapped around my right boot. The grip was absolute. I felt the boot compress around my foot. I kicked with my left leg and connected with nothing, then kicked again, and my heel found the rotted face of an old timber that had gone punky, and it dissolved under the impact in a shower of wood pulp and bark and something metallic. Logging cable. An inch thick, rusted orange-brown, but still fundamentally steel. The old high-lead stuff buried in the slash pile, since whoever logged this country last had gone home and forgotten it. I grabbed it with both hands and wound it around my left wrist, 1 full turn, and felt the individual strands bite into my jacket. Then I braced my right foot against the nearest solid timber and kicked straight back into the grip. The grip held. I kicked again. Nothing. Bigfoot had my boot in both hands now. I could feel it repositioning, and I understood with sudden clarity that it was going to pull me out of this pile the way you pull a cork from a bottle. And if it got me out into the open, what happened next? I let my weight drop. The full slack of my body hit the cable, and the cable went rigid, the far end. Buried deep in the pile, wrapped around something I couldn't see, went taut against its anchor. That anchor was connected to the structural heart of the pile. The whole thing tipped, the whole mass rotating around the fulcrum of the log Bigfoot had pushed first. Half-ton timbers began to slide. The hand released my boot. I heard the sound of massive weight redistributed suddenly and without preparation, and then the pile came apart outward in a cascade of rolling trunks and splitting wood that took Bigfoot down and backward into the debris field. I came out the other side on my hands and knees, stood up into a run. My left shoulder was screaming. Something had twisted in the socket when the cable snapped tight, and I ran with that arm pressed against my side like a broken wing and my lungs burning. And behind me, the debris field settled and went quiet. I gave it 30 seconds before I started to believe I'd bought myself real time. Then I heard the footsteps resume. The ravine opened without warning, the trees hiding it until I was already on the edge, and I went down the bank sideways, skating on mud and pine duff, and hit the bottom in a crouch that saved my ankles but drove my knees into the gravel. The river was narrow here, maybe 15 feet across, squeezed between cut banks of dark clay running high with snowmelt. I waded in without stopping. The cold was extraordinary. Not painful at first, too cold for pain, the kind of cold that simply erases sensation from the knee down and then begins working on your judgment. I was chest deep within 20 feet, feeling the current push at me in long, patient shoves, and I was moving upstream because downstream meant lower ground, and lower ground meant open ground, and open ground was where Bigfoot wanted me. The riverbed was fist-sized cobbles, slick with algae, and every step was a negotiation between balance and forward momentum that I was steadily losing. And if the river took my footing before Bigfoot reached me, which one would kill me first? The splash behind me was enormous. Not the tentative entry of something testing the water, a full commitment, both feet at once. The sound of serious weight displaced in a single instant. I didn't look back. I kicked forward, tried to get my feet under me on the cobbles, slipped and went down to one knee with water flooding over my shoulder and into my collar and down the back of my neck, in an ice bath that made me gasp and swallow water and come back up coughing. The hand around my ankle came from below. It had gone completely under, in water that was maybe 40 degrees, moving fast, with a current strong enough to stagger me. Bigfoot had gone under and moved through it like something that had done this before, had trained for it, had been patient in cold rivers for years, and now it had both hands around my right ankle and was pulling, not up, down, and back. I went under face first, and the world became brown water, and the muffled roar of current and the absolute immediate fact of that grip dragging me deeper. What chance did I have against something that seemed prepared for every escape I tried? I got my left foot around and found something with my heel, a face, a shoulder, hard bone through dense tissue, and pushed. Kicked my leg straight with everything I had. The grip slipped an inch. I kicked again, and the grip released, and I got my head up and gasped one full breath, went under again shallower, and came back up in time to see the beaver dam 30 yards ahead. A solid wall of sticks and mud and old branches, 4 feet tall, spanning the entire river. I drove myself forward through the current, swimming now because wading was too slow, and dove at the base blind. The sticks tore my jacket. I reached forward and grabbed and pulled and dragged myself through 6 feet of sticks and mud and cold water, and came out the other side gasping, rolling onto my back in the flat pond behind the dam, looking up at a sky gone pale gray. The dam shook. The whole structure shuddered as something large hit it from the upstream side, sticks popping, water finding new paths. I rolled and swam hard for the bank. Behind me, the dam shook again, and I heard it tearing open. How much time did that barrier really buy me? The south bank was a granite outcrop, a rock face rising in broken ledges beside a small waterfall dropping 8 feet into the pond. I hit the base at a dead swim and grabbed the first ledge and hauled myself up, wet clothes, adding 20 pounds, fingers barely functional from the cold. 10 feet. The surface was glazed with spray ice that my boots broke through when I was lucky and skated off when I wasn't. 15 feet. I looked down. Bigfoot was through the dam, standing in the pond, water to its waist, watching me with those amber eyes. Then it started toward the rock face and began to climb. It climbed the way it did everything, with total certainty, no hesitation, weight shifting smoothly between holds like it had climbed worse than this and wasn't particularly concerned. 20 feet. The waterfall spray hit my face, and the ledge under my boots was 4 inches wide, and my fingers had stopped sending reliable messages. I looked up. The next ledge was 6 feet above me. I looked down. Bigfoot was 10 feet below me and still climbing. I let go. Straight down along the face of the rock, tucking my chin, and hit the plunge pool at the base of the waterfall feet first. The rocks at the bottom came up faster than I expected. The left one hit my thigh, and the right one hit my ribs, already compressed in the log pile, and the combination drove the air out of me in an underwater grunt. I came up, crawled onto the gravel bar on my hands and knees, water streaming off me. How many more hits could my body take before it stopped cooperating? Bigfoot was still on the rock face. It descended methodically, hit the gravel 30 seconds later, stood 12 feet away, and watched me try to stand. Something in its expression had shifted almost imperceptibly. Not frustration, not anger. Assessment, like it was noting something down. I stood and I ran. The cabin was a trapper's shelter, decades old, door hanging on one leather hinge, floor flexing under my weight with the deep uncertainty of wood that has spent too long under a failing roof. I hit it at full speed, and the floor flexed once, twice, and fell through. The whole center section dropped, a 4-foot square of rotten planking that disintegrated under my weight, and I dropped 6 feet into the root cellar below, landing on packed dirt, rolling to absorb the impact. I lay there 3 seconds, staring up through the hole at gray light. Then I was on my feet. What in this place could possibly stop something like Bigfoot? The root cellar was 5 feet of headroom, dim, and hanging from the ceiling joists on loops of baling wire were 6 leg-hold traps. Number 4s, big ones, with 8-inch jaw spread and springs that had only gotten stiffer with 40 years of rust. I got 3 down, the ones with the most intact springs, and dragged them to the base of the ladder that led up to the original trapdoor. Set them jaw up in a triangle, jammed the jaws open with sections of stick. Then I climbed the shelving on the far wall, old pine that groaned but held, and from the top shelf I reached the floor joists and got myself up into the space where the floor used to be, balanced on 2 beams 10 feet above the root cellar in the dim remains of the cabin. The door frame filled with shadow. Bigfoot ducked under the lintel. The cabin walls bowed slightly inward, as if the structure was trying to accommodate something larger than it was designed for. Bigfoot stood in the middle of the cabin, looking around with those cold amber eyes, then looked down through the hole at the root cellar below. Then it looked up and found me on the beams. It stepped onto the ladder. The first trap took its right foot at the 3rd rung. The metal jaws snapped shut around the ankle with a screech of rust and spring steel that rang through the cabin like a gunshot. Bigfoot stopped, looked down, reached down with both hands, and simply pulled the trap open. Not off, just open. Jaws spread apart with the same easy effort I'd use opening a cabinet door, and stepped off the rung and onto the root cellar floor, right into the 2nd trap. If it could do that to steel, what exactly was I expecting these traps to accomplish? This one took the left foot at the arch, and for a moment I saw something flicker across Bigfoot's face that was not the calm assessment of everything that had come before. Annoyance. It knelt to address the 2nd trap, and that was when I dropped. 3rd trap in both hands, 10 feet of controlled fall, landing squarely on Bigfoot's back with enough impact to drive it forward onto its hands. I jammed the trap between its shoulder blades where the muscles flanked the spine and hit the release plate with my palm. The jaws snapped shut. Bigfoot straightened up immediately, reaching back, and I was already moving. Off its back, scrambling toward the back wall where a small horizontal window let in a slot of gray light, maybe 18 inches tall. I went through it head first. My hips hung for a moment, then I twisted and dropped into the ferns outside, Bigfoot's hand missing my boot by 3 inches. Behind me in the cabin came the sound of the trap finally releasing from something that did not yield easily, and then came the roar. Bigfoot had not made any real sound until that moment. This one went through me like a physical force, like standing too close to an explosion. Every bird within half a mile left its tree at once. I was in the ferns and sprinting, soaking wet, shoulder wrecked, ribs screaming, and behind me that sound rolled across the basin like it owned everything in it. I kept moving. The burn scar started without ceremony. One step I was in green timber, and the next I was in a dead world. Black snags, most leaning or fallen, ash on the ground, gray and fine, swallowing my boots to the ankle. The sky overhead was fully visible for the first time in hours, and the wind was picking up from the northwest in a way I knew from years of fire country travel. I went up a dead pine because there was no other option. The open ground of the burn scar was working in Bigfoot's favor, and elevation was the only variable I could change. Bigfoot was a shape in the black snags 300 yards back, steady and unhurried. The tree was a 60-foot skeleton, bark long gone, wood gone silver and dry as old bone, and I climbed the stub branches like a ladder, each one taking my weight for a half second before threatening to let go. At 55 feet, a branch snapped, and I was falling before I fully understood I was falling. Hit the first solid branch at 30 feet, and it broke clean, and the second at 20, and it broke too. And then I was in the fork of the trunk at 15 feet, wedged there like something the tree had decided to keep. The impact that stopped me felt like being struck by a car, a hard, whole-body stop with no give to it at all. Ribs, 2 of them, maybe 3. The wet crack was internal and intimate and impossible to misinterpret, and the breath went out of me and didn't come back for what felt like a long time. I slid down the remaining 15 feet and landed in the ash on my side. The dark shape in the burn was still moving, still closing, half a mile back, and patient as weather. I got up. The wind hit the ash, and it lifted. A column of fine gray particulate spun up from a depression in the burn scar floor 20 feet across, dark at the base and pale at the top, rotating and growing. A fire devil, the kind that forms in dry burn scars on windy afternoons. It drifted north on the wind and grew, and Bigfoot stopped, stood in the black snags, and watched the spinning column with those amber eyes. And for the first time I saw something in its expression that looked almost like uncertainty. I crawled to the burned-out pickup at the edge of the scar. In the bed, a rusted propane tank, a 20-pounder, the kind you'd take car camping. The valve was seized. I turned it, felt it break loose, heard the hiss. Pressed my thumb over the valve opening for 3 seconds to build pressure, then aimed and threw it into the base of the fire devil. The metal clanged against frozen ash, the valve sparked against a buried rock, and the fireball was not large, maybe 8 feet across, but it was enough. The fire devil became a column of fire. The rotation accelerated. It moved across the burn scar on the northwest wind with a crackling, roaring momentum, and it went directly for Bigfoot. Bigfoot ran. I had not seen it run yet. That terrible ground-eating walk was bad enough, but this was something else. Legs reaching and arms driving, and that massive body flowing across the ash in strides that must have been 15 feet apiece, covering ground at a rate that made no sense for a biped of that size. It ran south. I ran north. The fire devil spun and grew and chased between us, and I ran until the ash gave way to mineral soil, and the soil gave way to rock, and the rock ended at the edge of the world, 300 feet straight down. The canyon below was a narrow slot cut by water working on stone for longer than humans had existed, and the walls were nearly vertical. A ledge ran along the cliff face, 6 inches. Wide, a natural break in the granite paralleling the rim for as far as I could see in either direction. I stepped onto it. Back to the rock, arms spread at my sides like I was trying to hold the wall up, shuffling sideways with my heels hanging over 300 feet of open air. 50 feet. The ledge was solid granite, no flex, no crumble. 75 feet. The stone was cold through my jacket, and the wind came off the canyon in unpredictable gusts that pressed me in and then tried to pull me out. My broken ribs announced themselves with every breath. 2 sharp points inside my chest, grinding when I inhaled too deeply, so I learned to breathe shallow and fast like a dog. 100 feet out from the rim, and the ledge was still 6 inches wide, and I kept my eyes on the rock face in front of my nose and did not look down again. Stones scraped behind me. I looked back, and Bigfoot was on the ledge. It was not pressed against the rock. It stood fully upright, chest to the sky, arms loose at its sides, walking the ledge the way you'd walk a painted line in a parking lot, as if the 300-foot drop on its left were a detail beneath its attention. Its strides were long and easy, and it was already 40 feet closer than when I'd looked 30 seconds ago. I shuffled faster, misjudged the lip of the ledge with my right heel, and pressed back into the rock so hard my shoulder blades scraped granite, and I felt my heart do something architectural in my chest. Found my footing, kept moving. The ledge ended. A section of the cliff face had fractured and fallen at some point in the geological past. Where the ledge had been, there was now a clean 3-foot gap, and beyond it, the cliff face was featureless. Nothing to grab, nothing to stand on. I was on the last 6 inches of continuous ledge, and Bigfoot was 20 feet behind me and still walking, and it smiled at me again with those shattered plate teeth. Above the gap, maybe 6 feet overhead, a dead pine had toppled over the rim and lodged there, its root ball exposed, thick roots hanging down like a curtain. I jumped straight up, grabbed the nearest root with both hands, felt my shoulder tear something new and significant, and held on. The root flexed outward with my weight. I swung. At the apex, I was over the gap, and I let go and hit the far side of the cliff face with my boots and my palms and began to slide. My fingers found a horizontal crack and arrested the slide, feet scrabbling, and looked right, a lower ledge, 18 inches wide, dropping away to a talus slope that met the canyon floor 150 feet below. I dropped onto it, and my knees buckled, and I was sliding on the talus, riding loose rock down the slope, grabbing at nothing, and the canyon floor was rushing up, and I tucked and rolled, and the boulder pile at the bottom arrived all at once. The left leg snapped below the knee. I heard it the same way I'd heard the ribs. Intimate. Wrong. The pain followed a half-second later. enormous and clarifying, and I hit the gravel of the creek bank and lay still. Above me on the talus slope, a shape. Bigfoot had gone off the rim itself, not the ledge, 15 feet above, dropping free onto the talus in a controlled fall no human body could have managed, landing and skiing down it on its feet in a shower of displaced rock. It landed on the gravel bar and walked toward me. Walked, no limp, no hesitation. It stood over me and looked down, and I looked up at it against the pale sky, and I had absolutely nothing left. No weapon, no plan, no running. The leg was broken, and the ribs were broken, and my shoulder had been wrong since the log pile, and I was hypothermic from the river, and I was finished. I rolled into the creek, 6 inches of snowmelt over algae-slick cobbles, barely enough to float a hand, and I rolled into it because it was the only direction I could move. Bigfoot stepped in after me, and the cobbles shifted under its weight, and the left foot went out. Not a full fall, a slip, a momentary loss of purchase, and the forehead came down on the boulder at the creek's edge with a sound like a bat hitting a watermelon. Bigfoot went down on both hands in the creek, stunned, head hanging. 3 seconds, maybe 4. I grabbed the sharpest rock within reach, fractured granite, angular, the size of a grapefruit, and swung it with everything I had left. It connected with Bigfoot's face in a burst of black blood and the crack of something structural giving way, and Bigfoot's head snapped sideways, and the mouth came open wide, and the howl that came out was not the thin human whimpering from before. This was enormous and ragged, the sound of something that had finally, unexpectedly, felt something it did not like. The claws came across my back in 4 parallel lines of fire, and I was rolling again, into the current, moving downstream, and the creek was dropping. I could hear it, the pitch of the water changing, faster, more turbulent. And then I saw the culvert, a mining drainage pipe, concrete, maybe 3 feet in diameter, disappearing into the cliff face at the downstream end of the canyon. The creek surface went flat before it and slipped over the lip into the dark at a downslope angle. I went in. The cold closed over me completely. The pipe was just wide enough for my body with my arms stretched ahead, and the water filled every inch of available space, and the rock walls moved past my hands in total darkness. I could not see. I could hear nothing but the roar of moving water in an enclosed space. My fingers scraped concrete and found no purchase, and the current took me, and I moved. I moved through the dark with the water filling my mouth and my ears and my nose, and the walls closed on all sides. And behind me in the canyon, there was nothing. No sound of pursuit, no splash, nothing. The dark was complete. The water was very cold. The walls were very close. I moved. I don't know how long the culvert was. I know there was an end to it, or I wouldn't be telling this, but in the dark and cold of that pipe, the concept of an ending was abstract and far away. All I knew was the water in my mouth and the rock scraping my palms and the current moving me forward into nothing. I have not been back to that basin. The leg healed, the ribs healed, the 4 lines across my back healed to scars I can feel when I reach behind me. And sometimes in the dark before I'm fully asleep, I feel the grip around my ankle again, that absolute, total grip, and I lie still and I wait for it to release me.